Next on C-SPAN, live coverage of a joint congressional hearing on video game violence. In just a few moments, we expect members of Senate Governmental Affairs and Judiciary subcommittees to begin taking testimony in industry efforts to rate games to inform consumers about violent and sexually suggestive video games. You'll hear from the chair of an industry committee developing the rating system, representatives from retailers Sega and Nintendo, and officials of the video arcade industry. Senators Joseph Lieberman of Connecticut and Herbert Kohl of Wisconsin co-chair the proceedings. They've introduced a bill that would create a commission to rate video games if the industry failed to develop a workable system within a year.
Hearing with my friend and colleague from Wisconsin, Senator Herb Kohl, and I yield to him at this time for an opening statement.
Well, thank you very much, Senator Lieberman. Ladies and gentlemen, first off, I'd like to thank Senator Lieberman and commend him and his staff for their commitment to our nation's young people, whether by keeping handguns away from children or by ensuring that parents can continue to shape their children's values. Senator Lieberman's efforts deserve great applause. Today we are here to receive a progress report from members of the video game and the video arcade industry. We will also hear from retailers who are a critical link in the system that we hope will protect our children. Let me give you my honest perspective on this issue. Violent video games are harmful to our children, and at a time when we need to cultivate morality in our society, these games, like too much of what we see on television and at the movies, teach our children all the wrong values. And in my opinion, they should not be on the market. But we live by and we cherish a Constitution that prevents government from censoring material. So we will try to live with a rating system, either one authored by the industry or, if need be, mandated under the Lieberman-Kohl proposal. At our December hearing, we said that if the men and women of the video game industry made developing a rating system a top priority, then it would happen this year. And in January of this year, industry leaders met to begin this process. Based on preliminary reports, it seems that a video game rating system may well be in place during the balance of this year. And indeed, we certainly hope that this happens. In the interim, the video game industry has also made some headway on other fronts. It has removed one of the worst offenders, Night Trap, which we highlighted at the last hearing, from the shelves. And it appears that Acclaim Incorporated may not release an updated, more violent version of Mortal Kombat, another game that was featured at our December hearing, at least until the rating system is in place. And so we want to thank Mr. Heistand, Sega, Nintendo, the AMOA, the AAMA, and others for their cooperation to date. Still, we need more than just a good beginning. We need results. As the public's outrage over games like Night Trap and Mortal Kombat demonstrated, consumers want to make sure that a real rating system is in place. At the very least, a rating system that will let parents know precisely what their children are playing. We need to give the video game industry a fair opportunity to address this issue itself, and we are giving them that time. But, and we need to emphasize this point, we are prepared to take action if our goals and our timetables are not met. And that is why Senator Lieberman, Senator Dorgan, and I have introduced the Video Game Rating Act of 1994. That is why we are prepared to press for legislative action if the industry's voluntary efforts fail. Because video games, more than almost any other form of entertainment, are aimed at our children, and with interactive technology and virtual reality on the horizon, video games are going to become even more sophisticated and more persuasive. Indeed, anyone who does not believe that children need protection from many of the items that will pass along the information superhighway is simply not living in the real world. So again, we thank the video game industry for its participation in this process. And let me tell you this, we want you and not us to develop a voluntary rating system. We want you and not us to let parents know what they are buying for their children. We prefer self-regulation to government regulation, but make no mistake about it, we will move ahead if you do not. Thank you very much, Senator Lieberman.
Thank you, Senator Kohl. It has been a great pleasure to work with you in this matter that is important to our society and our kids. And I must say it's particularly satisfying that today I think we're going to begin to see a significant reaction to the concerns that we expressed at our earlier hearings, and that's not always a common occurrence here in Washington. So I'm grateful for that. At our previous hearing on December 9th of last year, the leaders of the video game industry committed to building a credible rating system and to having it in place by the holiday shopping season at the end of 1994. For a very competitive industry, that commitment was significant. And today I am pleased to see that the effort of the industry is beginning to show results. But of course the proof is in the pudding, and it is our goal to review today and in the coming months whether the ingredients the industry is using will result in a rating system people can trust to give them the information they need about video games. And make no mistake about it, the people want this information. Video Game Magazine has just conducted a poll in which the American people were asked whether they wanted a rating system for video games. The support was overwhelming. 73% of the American people said they wanted a rating system. Only 18% said they did not. And that support cuts across all age groups, income levels, races, and regions. 2 weeks after our December 9th hearing, Senator Cole and I sent a letter to the industry, which I will insert in the record of this hearing. In it, we set forth what we consider to be the adequate and required contents of a strong video game rating system. Senator Cole and I are going to continue to use that letter as a benchmark to react to and measure the industry's efforts. And I want to briefly summarize the points that we made. In it, we said that a strong rating board and system must, one, be independent, two, have members who reflect the public, not the industry, three, have the power to penalize wrongdoers, four, be able to keep pace with technological advances, five, create ratings that are clearly understood by consumers, and six, advertise the ratings so they become as well known to purchasers as movie ratings are today, perhaps better known. Let me briefly be more specific. Any rating system proposed by the video game industry will be subject to charges that it is not objective, that it will bend to the marketing whims of the companies that pay its bills. To gain the public's trust, it is therefore imperative that those responsible for rating games be absolutely insulated from pressure by the industry and be free to rate without fear or favor. There must be a range of views expressed on the rating panel. A panel made up of former marketing managers from the leading manufacturers would obviously not be trusted. The panel should include men and women, parents and educators. In short, it should reflect the public and its standards rather than the industry. One of the most exciting aspects of the video game industry is the pace of technological development. But rapid change also points out the need for the rating system to be flexible enough to handle tomorrow's games as well as today's. Thus, we have asked that the rating board define its mission broadly to cover all interactive video games, including games played on personal computers as well as on closed platform systems. To be credible, the rating system must have teeth. Those who abuse it must be subject to sanctions. And of course, abuse may take many forms, including using the ratings in advertising to attract attention for a game. Abuse might also involve deceiving the rating council about the contents of a game by submitting an inaccurate version of a game, or a company might issue a more violent version of a game after submitting a tamer copy for review. And therefore, we must be sure that the rating council has both the means and the will to sanction offenders. I hope the industry will also educate the public about the way the rating system works. A major campaign to alert parents, consumers, to the meaning of the rating symbols will be central, I think, to its effectiveness. Otherwise, the ratings may go unnoticed like the fine print on our airline tickets. As the industry begins to define the actual rating categories, it must listen to the voices of parents, educators, and other experts and work to incorporate their suggestions into the final product. Second, the rating should provide as much information about the reason for the rating as possible. For example, if the game has sexual content, that should be clear in the rating. The same should hold for violence and offensive language. Third, the ratings, I believe, must have tough, conservative standards, lest the confidence of parents be lost. If you rate a game as being okay for kids, and we still find an enormous amount of blood and guts on the screen, then in my view, the rating is meaningless and the system loses its credibility. Now, I want to thank the retail store representatives who are joining us today. They really are on the front lines of video game sales and are often the first ones to hear from irate parents. They also can play a key, in some ways determinative role in building a rating system, but more than that, in making that system work. I'm pleased also to see representatives of the arcade industry here today to report on their progress in responding to our earlier hearing. I understand the ways in which the home consumer video market differs from the arcade market, but the need for information about the content of games is just as significant regardless of where the game is played. Now, as Senator Cole indicated, since our hearing in December, there have been some significant steps taken, particularly by the two major manufacturers or video game producers, Nintendo and Sega, and I appreciate those steps. Sega has withdrawn the game Night Trap from the market and has worked to ensure that advertising prominently displays its own ratings. Nintendo has responded to complaints about an ad that promoted a game based on its violent content, and as was pointed out at the last hearing, it had previously decided to produce a less violent version of Mortal Kombat and not to produce and market Night Trap at all. All of those steps signify a recognition by the companies of their responsibility to the public. I commend them and hope that this spirit continues forward beyond the narrow window of congressional scrutiny. Now, while it appears that the industry has made progress in the past few months to provide the public with a credible rating system, the most critical steps clearly lay ahead. If the industry does its job, we will have accomplished our job, and legislation will be unnecessary. And that would be fine with me and with Senator Cole. However, the key will be the effectiveness of the rating system in providing parents with the information they need and want about the content of these games. Therefore, until we are confident that a strong rating system is in place, we will not pull the plug on our bill. Finally, I want to repeat my call for self-regulation of the content of the video games by the industry itself. The fact is that if the video game industry had practiced self-restraint before now, we wouldn't be here today. Let me put this message, if I may, directly to the video game industry. If there were not blood and gore and sex in some of these games, the truth is you wouldn't need to rate the games. I encourage the video game manufacturers to do more to remove violent and sexual images from the games. And respectfully, I warn you that a rating system must not become an excuse to market ever more violent games. Our society simply does not need more violent messages assaulting our children. Let me quote to you from a letter that a 13-year-old, Tara Geist, wrote to the editor of the Norwich Bulletin in Connecticut, in which she described riding on her school bus with young children passing around pictures of the figures in Mortal Kombat ripping off heads. She said, and I quote, "These games are repulsive. When younger and older kids think that blood and violence is cool, that's a bad sign." Well, Tara is right. There are many bad signs about children and violence these days. The leading cause of death for black and white teenage boys in America is gunshot wounds. 1 out of every 25 high school students carries a gun to school. An estimated 1.2 million latchkey kids below the age of 12 are left alone with access to guns in their houses. They absorb the violence they see in the media, and it affects their behavior. Senator Cole and I are clearly not saying that if video games were limited to Barney and Pac-Man, that violence would be out of our society. But we are saying that there are strong cultural forces at work, and video games are part of them, that raise our children these days as much as we parents do. And if those games make violence exciting or even satisfying, then they contribute to the violence in our society that ruins the order that all of us yearn for. So members of the video game industry, I say to you, you have the power in this remarkable technology to elevate or denigrate our society and our children. I hope you will use your power to entertain and enlighten rather than to incite and enrage. When we began this effort, Bob Keeshan, who for many years was Captain Kangaroo on television, reminded us of an old African proverb, which is that it takes an entire village to raise a child. The video game industry is a growing part of the electronic village in which we all live. And I urge you to recognize your responsibility as members of that village to help us raise our children and your children in the appropriate way. I think that the message that we're going to hear from you today, from what I've heard about it, will suggest that you are accepting that responsibility, and I thank you for that. I look forward to the testimony. And now I would like to introduce our colleague from the House, Congressman Tom Lantos, who is not only a colleague but a friend and a leader on many issues, a parent, a grandparent, and has been good enough to introduce the legislation which Senators Cole and Dorgan and I have introduced in the Senate on the House side. Congressman Lantos, welcome, and we look forward to your testimony.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And at the outset, I want to commend you and Senator Cole for the remarkable leadership you have shown on this extraordinarily important matter. I would like to make just a few brief comments because I know you want to hear from the industry on their progress so far. As you have indicated, I introduced in the House parallel legislation, H.R. 3785, to achieve the goals we all seek. And those goals basically are not to establish a governmentally mandated approach to this extremely important issue, but to stimulate industry self-policing to such an extent that governmental action will not be necessary. Let me say, however, that should the industry not respond adequately, cosmetic changes and cosmetic measures will not suffice. I think other measures would have to be taken. Let me report to you, gentlemen, that there is strong bipartisan support in the House for the measure that you have introduced here and I introduced there. As a matter of fact, we have begun preliminary discussions with mass organizations involving teachers, school boards, parent-teacher organizations, law enforcement agencies, and others to build the kinds of grassroots support for this legislation that it clearly calls for. I think it's important to note that we should not demonize the industry. Torture, sadism, violence had been here long before this industry was born. From Chinese water torture to the Marquis de Sade and Dracula, we have a long and undistinguished record of the creativity of the human imagination in portraying horror to each other. And I suspect at a time when our daily papers are filled with everything from drive-by shootings to the nightmare in Bosnia, and Schindler's List is headed for a sweep of the Academy Awards, it's important to realize that we are living in a world which is an unending horror show. This makes it all the more important that one of the most exciting new technologies be designed for constructive purposes so that it will propel us towards a more civilized and not a less civilized society. I'm a professional economist, not a child psychologist, but I also have 15 grandchildren. And I don't think it takes an expert to understand that if, in addition to the ongoing onslaught of the real world with all its nightmare, children play with instruments of nightmare and torture and exploitation of human beings and human sentiments in a way that some of these products that at your last hearing you discussed, they become insensitive and view this as routine. I also would like to say a word about corporate responsibility. Now, there are countless examples of genuine corporate responsibility, but there are just as many examples of corporate irresponsibility. From polluting factories to unsafe automobiles over the years, to the sale of poison gas facilities to Libya, and the sale of nuclear and missile materials to Iraq, the world is filled with people who, for a quick buck, are ready to create not just horror shows in a child's bedroom as he plays with these games, but horror shows in the real world. So self-policing must be effective in order to be an acceptable substitute for government action. Even in such relatively unexciting arenas as the making of pizza, I have found, as chairman of the Oversight Subcommittee on Labor in the House of Representatives a few years ago, exposure is probably our most effective tool. Domino's Pizza, with its 30-minute deadline to deliver its product, caused the death of a young underage boy who was driving their truck on a slippery city street to deliver before the 30-minute deadline expires. I had the painful opportunity of having his mother tell me how she lost her only son because corporate irresponsibility drove this 15-year-old boy to drive his pizza delivery truck too fast. There is no doubt in my mind, gentlemen, that exposure, social ostracism, financial threat of losing the market is really our most effective tool, not governmental action. Just as in a totally different field, in the field of Chinese human rights violations, exposure and the danger of losing most favored nation treatment might lead the Chinese government to behave more decently towards its own citizens. Even the least responsible members of the decision-making community that determines what our children and grandchildren see in interactive video, the threat of public exposure, social ostracism, and the subsequent financial penalties are probably our best allies. Now, I know that the industry, and I hope that the industry will be, an ally and not an adversary of ours in this effort. But I would like to be sure. And as a trial effort and many of my colleagues are going to be watching the results, we will be holding a town meeting in my congressional district, the 12th Congressional District of California, involving the full range of participants. We will invite the industry, but we will also invite teachers, parent-teacher organization leaders, school board leaders, law enforcement officials, child psychologists, and others. And we will get together in a town meeting to see whether we can deal with this issue in a cooperative and civilized way, which is my hope. There is no doubt in my mind that the industry would be well served if it would recognize that cosmetic changes will not suffice. Substantive change is called for. This enormously powerful influence cannot just be neutral. It will have to become a positive force in making our society more civilized. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Congressman Lantos.
And we thank you very much for coming here this morning, and your words were distinguished, eloquent, and I think very well received.
Thank you very much.
We will now call the first panel to the table, representing the video game manufacturers, Jack Heistand, Vice President, Sega of America. Gentlemen, we welcome you and thank you for being here. Mr. Lincoln, you returned for the second time, this time becoming a co-CEO of Nintendo. I don't know whether your appearance here was responsible in December for your elevation to that post or whether it occurred in spite of that. But in any case, we congratulate you and welcome you back and thank you for your continued cooperation. Same to you, Mr. Volkwein and Mr. Heistand. Jack, I think we're going to ask you to go first.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. My name is Jack Heistand. I'm the Senior Vice President for Electronic Arts, the largest publisher of interactive entertainment products. I'm appearing here today on behalf of our Industry Rating System Committee, a group that was formed to recommend to our industry what rating system would be put in place for products. Besides EA, the committee members include Acclaim, Atari, Nintendo, Philips, Sega, and the 3DO Company. Together, these companies comprise over 60% of the interactive software market. And I'm happy to report my testimony is supported in all respects by each of these companies. We appreciate the opportunity to report on our progress the industry has made since January in developing a system for interactive entertainment software. We understand and we agree with your interest in ensuring that consumers have the information they need to make informed decisions about the games they purchase. Specifically, our industry recognizes that our products clearly reach a significant number of children and that parents comprise a sizable portion of consumers purchasing our products. We strongly believe that it's time to put the game controls in the hands of parents and adult consumers through the creation of a universal, responsible, reliable, understandable, and independent rating system. At the same time, we recognize that the home video game component of our industry has undergone enormous change since Atari introduced a video game called Pong in 1976. Today, less than 20 years later, this is a $6 billion category, offering thousands of titles with three-dimensional graphics, full-motion video, live action, and dozens of levels of play in a single title. Our software is designed for all kinds of platforms, including cartridge systems like Nintendo and Sega Genesis, CD systems like 3DO, Philips CDI, for personal computers and personal computers with compact disc capacity. We know that the one constant in our industry is change, and we mark our technological and our creative strides not in years, but in months. These changes are having a profound impact on our market. Originally, the predominant portion of our market were products for children, and of course, they're still an important segment. But as more sophisticated technology evolves, our market is rapidly attracting a more diverse and older audience. The Atari generation of the 70s, the Nintendo generation of the 80s have grown up, and many young adults are using a wide variety of interactive entertainment software products. We're committed to educating all consumers, especially parents, about the content of our products, But in developing a rating system, we must all be mindful of the fact that this is an industry much like the movie industry, producing entertainment for consumers of all ages and with varied interests. The rating system we devise must work for all of our users, including our key constituencies, retailers, software developers, and the creative community at large. The task we set out to accomplish earlier this year was even more challenging than many of us had imagined. It is daunting enough to develop and implement in a very short time a system capable of rating 2,500 titles annually. To put this into perspective, that's 4 times the level that the Motion Picture Association of America reviews annually. Our task is made even more challenging by additional factors, including our desire to make this system work for over 200 publishers, which span in size from garage operations where 2 people would produce a computer software game to multinational companies. On top of all these challenges, we are trying to design a system which will be workable for consumers, the industry, as well as many others whose support is central to making this system universal, including retailers, arcade machine manufacturers, arcade operators, and online electronic delivery systems. Before going into detail on where we are and what we have to report today, I want to make one brief comment about content of video game titles. Our committee's mandate is to design a system that will give consumers the information they need to make informed purchasing decisions, not to tell software developers or software publishers what to put in game titles. Neither the association nor the government can or should regulate game content. That should remain the responsibility of individual game publishers and platform manufacturers. With this context, let's get to the meat and review the 13 points that we've carefully thought out and have agreed to recommend to our industry. Given the enormity of this task, I believe we've made extraordinary progress in a period of 2 months since we've launched our efforts. First, we've agreed to have a rating system in place by Christmas 1994. Products coming to market after November 1 will, if submitted by publishers in a timely fashion, be rated under the new system. Second, we will form a new industry trade association and establish an independent arm of that association as a ratings board made up of people from a variety of fields, including educators, parents, child development experts. This board will be empowered upon submission of software titles from publishers to determine a final rating for the submitted titles before they reach store shelves. Third, starting this month, we will begin intensive consultations and research with experts across the country to develop guidelines and test different rating categories to determine which ones will be most effective and easily understood by consumers. We will make these proposed guidelines available and will seek public comment. We are aiming to complete work on both guidelines and rating categories in June. Fourth, we have agreed that the rating symbols will be accompanied by words describing the content of the title. In this way, parents and others will be able to get a very clear picture of the content of a title. Fifth, we have agreed that all packaging, all advertising, print and broadcast, all consumer marketing materials will display the rating symbol. Sixth, we have agreed that publishers will be required to submit for rating the most extreme content of any title. Seventh, we have agreed to a system that will result in tough sanctions against any company that withholds relevant information in event secures a rating fraudulently. These sanctions could include, for example, a trademark enforcement suit with the threat of civil penalty, or a demand that a company resticker a product already on the market, which is an expensive proposition. Eighth, we've agreed to adopt a voluntary advertising code of conduct for association members. This code will include guidelines on such things as properly targeting ads to users for whom the product is rated as appropriate. Ninth, we have contacted retailers to help develop a system they can support. I'm pleased to report that Walmart, one of the largest retailers, I believe the largest retailer in America today, and a large seller of video games, is committed to stocking only rated products. I believe we will have similar commitments from other chains as well. In addition, we will work with retailers and encourage them to prominently display the ratings in any titles they feature in their own advertisements. 10th, starting later this month, we will be actively soliciting support for this system from every entertainment software publisher, regardless of platform. 11th, we've invited arcade operators and manufacturers to participate in our process and adopt our rating system, and we are prepared to help them and make a system like ours that works for their distinct and unique interests. 12th, we have agreed that any game which is rated must display that rating in whatever form it is delivered, whether online or through cable television. Last, 13th, we will mount an intensive consumer and retailer education campaign to ensure that everyone understands the system. We've laid out more details about these points in my written testimony so that you can get a better idea, for instance, of how the ratings board will function, how the ratings process will work, and what we'll be doing to make it effective. But in conclusion, our agenda for the next few months is an ambitious one, and we are committed to maintain and, among other tasks, achieve the following: finalize the formation of a trade association and the ratings board, reach out to the industry to secure as much participation as possible, conduct research with experts and consumers to develop guidelines and rating categories, and continue our dialogue with retailers, culminating in a meeting with them at the Consumer Electronics Show in June in Chicago. We're very proud of the progress we've made to date. We know much remains to be done, and we look forward to completing this process of giving consumers the information they need to make informed, interactive entertainment purchasing decisions. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to share our progress with you today.
Thank you very much, Mr. Heisten. That is a very encouraging report, and it seems to me you have made substantial progress. I'll have some questions for you afterward, but I thank you for that report. I think it's extremely noteworthy, just to jump ahead, that you report that Walmart has agreed to stock only rated games. That is as much as powerful an enforcement mechanism as I think we could want here, and I hope that the other major retailers will follow. Mr. Lincoln, you're next.
Mr. Chairman, I don't have a prepared statement, but I would like to make just several comments.
Could you raise the mic, please, and just speak a little bit directly now? Thank you.
As you know, when I testified in December, I indicated that Nintendo would work with the industry to come up with a comprehensive, understandable rating system. This industry, as you also know, is not an organized industry. We don't have a trade association as yet, and it's a highly competitive industry. I think you saw some of that at the December hearing. I think a great deal of progress has been made. I think that this particular issue should not, and we don't regard it as a competitive issue. And I'm pleased to say that both Nintendo and Sega and other manufacturers and third-party software publishers have joined together under the leadership of Jack Heistand to make a lot of progress. There's still a lot to be done, but I believe that if we continue the approach that we have taken, which is to delegate the responsibility to Jack Heistand, that we're going to be able to complete the task that he set out this morning in a timely fashion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lincoln. Mr. Volkwine, thanks for being here.
Thank you very much, Chairman Lieberman. My name is Edward Volkwine. I'm a Senior Vice President for Marketing for Sega of America and the father of 3 girls ages 2, 21, and 24. I'm also Sega's representative to the Industry Working Group created in response to your call for an industry-wide rating system. During the past 3 months, I've been deeply involved in the industry's efforts. Thank you for the opportunity to appear. At your hearing on this subject last December, you impressed upon all of us in the video game industry the need to responsibly address your concerns and to ensure that all consumers, and parents in particular, have the information they need to select age-appropriate games. We told you then that there was reason to be optimistic about our industry's ability to give parents the information they need to choose the right video games for children. Now, less than 3 months later, we have taken a number of those actions which I believe confirm the ability of this industry to successfully monitor itself. Beyond the industry actions, we promised in December that Sega would take significant independent actions to strengthen the voluntary rating system we currently have in effect, and we have done that. We told you that Sega would do its part to ensure that as an industry, we would begin a process to implement a uniform industry-wide rating system in time for the 1994 holiday season, and we have. I will share with you some specific examples of Sega's progress since we were last here. But first, a brief word about our industry. There may still be some misperceptions. Video games are only one category of the newly evolving interactive digital media industry. At Sega, we have 3 hardware platforms. The average age of user for our most popular platform, Sega Genesis, is 19 years old. The average age user for our most technologically advanced platform, Sega CD, is 22 years old. Many companies develop software to play on our system, just as many companies develop software to run on IBM PCs or Apple Macintosh systems. We ask you to allow this medium the same freedom to evolve as been accorded earlier forms of media, unfettered by government censorship. We, in turn, will do our part by giving all consumers the information they need to make informed choices. And we have been doing our part. Almost 2 years ago, Sega began developing its own games rating system. The Sega program to assist parents and other consumers make informed purchase decision includes a rating classification system, a toll-free hotline, and an informational brochure. We completed implementation of the program last September. But as with any new effort of this type, our program had room for improvement. Throughout the fall and winter, Sega continued to do just that by strengthening the program's advertising, marketing, and promotional features. First, all television and print advertisements created by Sega, by our video game products, display our Video Game Rating Council symbol prominently. I have a tape showing how we have added the rating symbol to all of our television advertising, which I will leave with the committee staff. Second, we have explicitly conditioned the availability of co-op advertising dollars on strict adherence by retailers to Sega's advertising standards. No game rating, no advertising dollars from Sega. Third, Sega revised its marketing materials to improve the visibility of our ratings, and we have worked to ensure that brochures promoting our rating system are widely available at all retail outlets. Fourth, Sega has sought maximum possible compliance from publishers who develop software compatible with the Sega platform. In addition, I want to highlight the ways in which Sega is using technology to make our products even more parent-friendly. In the next few weeks, the Sega Channel will launch on a pilot basis in a number of cable systems in the United States. The Sega Channel is an interactive cable service that will deliver Sega Genesis video games direct to the home. Through the use of a coding device, our Password for Parents program will let parents screen out games based on their rating. For instance, if they choose, parents will be able to allow only GA-rated games into their home through the Sega Channel. By standing behind the voluntary rating system concept with this investment in technology, Sega's tried to respond to the concerns of parents and others in a substantive and meaningful way. In the future, we will explore using technology to reinforce rating systems on new hardware platforms. Sega's efforts to develop and implement a voluntary rating system are evidence that we are long-standing advocates of giving information to consumers and giving parents in particular the opportunity to act on that information. Sega fully supports the industry-wide effort led by Mr. Highstand. We are prepared for and look forward to the time when Sega's independent rating system can be replaced by a uniform industry-wide program. To that end, we are sharing with the industry working group the practical experience Sega has gained from developing and then implementing its own system. We're proud of the speed and seriousness with which this initiative is being undertaken, and we are committed to making it work. Thank you for this opportunity to testify.
Thank you, Mr. Volkwine. Let me just say to all of you briefly before I yield to Senator Cole to begin the questioning that I again appreciate what you've done here, and I think that you've heard the voices of people around this country, particularly parents, who feel in a struggle to raise their own children with influences in our culture, including video games, and I appreciate that response. You're not the first element or part of the entertainment industry to be confronted with questions like the ones that Senator Cole and I have raised. Decades ago, people raised the same question about comic books and movies, and more recently about music and television and cable. But I think you're on the way to doing something significant here, and I really would like to challenge you to work continue to work with us to build a system of ratings and content guidelines that will become the model for the rest of the entertainment and cultural industry, because there's a lot on the line here, and obviously there's more to do with the ratings categories and how you implement them and how we go forward with them. But I do think we're off to a significant start here, and I thank you for that. Senator Cole.
Thank you, Senator Lieberman. For those who are watching today, Mr. Heistand, Mr. Lincoln, Mr. Vogtwein, again, I join with Senator Lieberman in commending you on your obvious willingness and your desire to see an effective rating system in place and functioning throughout our country. What are the problems in getting it done? You know, I was thinking while you all were testifying that at one point we were totally unable to tell the American people about 45 years ago, 50 years ago, not able to tell the American people how and when we were going to be able to assure them that polio was no longer a problem in our country. And several years went by, we developed a way and a mean to ensure virtually all American children against the scourge of polio. Things had to be done, and we accomplished it. As you look ahead to the balance of this year, when we had hoped by the end of the year and expected that we would have a system in place and functioning and getting the job done, what are the problems that you anticipate, both at the manufacturing and distribution and the retail level, in trying to get this system up and running so that we can tell the American people by the end of the year, yes, indeed, we have jointly taken on a challenge and we can say that we've accomplished what we set out to do. Mr. Heistand, would you comment on that?
Certainly. We've made a public commitment that the system would be in place by this holiday season. We could not have made that commitment if we did not believe we could have an independent and credible system in place by that date. Right now we have every reason to believe that this will occur, and the discussions we've had with retailers, the preliminary discussions we've had within our industry lead us to believe we can make this happen. The major pitfall we would see right now, something that would slow us down, is if we work backwards. If we have to start thinking about existing products in the marketplace, if we have to sit and debate individual titles that exist today. Our goal is to get the system defined and operating so that products that ship into the marketplace in September, October, November, December will be rated.
Well, let's examine that. As I understood you to say, or perhaps you can enlighten us, you do not or you cannot say today that you represent the entire industry.
That's correct.
So isn't that going to be a problem that needs to be addressed successfully before, again, as we move towards the route, toward what our goal is, which is to assure the American people that we have resolved the problem?
Absolutely.
Isn't that a problem that needs to be addressed?
Yes.
And how do you imagine that you are going to be able to address it successfully? And isn't it also true that unless you do, then those who we have on board right now at some point will say, and understandably so, if you cannot handle my competitors and get them on board, at some point you have to be willing to let me off board. Is that a possibility?
Right now, the 7 companies that sit on the committee that are going back to the industry at large represent 60% of the software and hardware business. We know we've spent the last 60 days creating a roadmap for the solution. The next 60 days, our main objective is going to be outreach. We need to talk to members of SPA, we need to talk to the members of the Interactive Multimedia Association, and we need to reach out to our industry at large, which we plan to do. The single most important thing that could occur to bring our industry together lies within the delivery vehicles. So when a company like Walmart says they will stock rated products only, it makes our job putting together a universal, reliable, responsible, understandable rating system much easier.
So we've made a good beginning, but clearly there's a long way to go, understandably, but clearly there's a considerable distance to go yet before we will be in a position to say that we have accomplished our task. As you've pointed out, until virtually or most all department stores or outlets in our country are prepared not to stock rated games, then there is a problem that has not yet been successfully addressed. Isn't that ultimately where in the marketplace, if you have, for example, unless you can say that you expect to get all manufacturers on board, and I don't, tell us how that's going to work. How do you see that thing unfolding in the next several months?
Well, the easiest way to get maximum compliance throughout the industry is if the market drives it, and our business is very much market-driven. We can't dictate to publishers to sign up or manufacturers to sign up. It's a voluntary rating system. But if parents are demanding rated products, if retailers are encouraging that rated products be supplied, all publishers will fall in line.
All right. Now, does this whole thing fall if I'm not able to get Kohl's department stores on board?
We would appreciate your help.
All right. Thank you very much. I think you're doing great, and I think it's a wonderful start, and I really am very pleased.
I'm sure that Kohl's department stores will set the national standard, as you have personally, Senator. Again, let me just first indicate for the record that Senator Cochran, who could not be here, has submitted 3 questions regarding the educational potential of these games, and we'll ask that each member of this panel answer them after the hearing for the record. Let me continue with some of the questions that Senator Kohl asked, just to carry through on the system. Mr. Heistand, as you know, we were very concerned about the interplay of ratings and advertising. At our last hearing, we showed examples of advertisements in which the child appeared to be below the rated age group, and others in which the ratings were obscured, and others in which the ratings were used actually to punctuate and, in a sense, to market the violent nature and content of the game. Senator Kohl and I raised these concerns in a letter we wrote to the Federal Trade Commission in December. You state that the industry committee would be developing an advertising code. I wonder if you can give us a better idea of what you are thinking of and how it would relate to the concerns that we discussed at our last hearing and in our letter to the FTC.
What we're describing as a voluntary advertising code would be similar to what the Children's Advertising Review Unit has in place today. What we would be recommending to our industry to do is there would be minimum requirements for display of the rating symbol as well as the words that describe the content of the title. We would be recommending that the casting of any children in an ad, whether it's a print ad or whether it's a television ad, has got to reflect the suitability or the age appropriateness as designated by the rating. And third, we would encourage that the media buying strategy also reflect that. If a product is intended for a 13 to 17-year-old audience, it shouldn't be advertised on a show that predominantly has an audience of 4 to 6-year-olds. Regarding to, is there an opportunity for this to be a cynical marketing ploy? All of us that have children or spend times with children, we know one thing. A 9-year-old wants to have what a 13-year-old has, and what a 13-year-old thinks is desirable. It's a tough decision for us, because we know by putting age breaks in our rating communications to parents, kids are going to want to emulate the older kids and what they have. But we think the importance of putting those age breaks in there and communicating the suitability of programming to parents far outweighs the potential that younger kids are going to want to have what the older kids have.
It's a good comprehensive answer. I was particularly interested in the third point of the 3 you initially made, which is, again, because of the power of television advertising, if we have a product that your system rates as MA-17 or whatever the category is, it would suggest it's not suitable for people under 17, and it's rated, and that product is advertised on shows that we know have audiences considerably younger, that would seem to me to be a substantial violation of the intent of the code and a frustration of the purpose of the rating code. Do you contemplate any deterrent or sanctions against a company that would violate the intention of the code in that direct a way? In other words, what's the enforcement mechanism here?
We have discussed and gotten agreement within our committee for sanctions regarding misleading the review process on ratings. We haven't gotten to a discussion yet or reached agreement on sanctions for an advertising review code, but we will put that on our list and report back to you.
I'd appreciate that. I understand it is a step beyond the initial question and the fundamental question of the honesty of the presentation to the rating board and the adherence to that rating. Nonetheless, as we've learned here, this system is only going to be as strong as every link from the production to the actual purchase by the consumer, hopefully an informed purchase. And advertising is so important that the integrity of the advertising part of this process will be a critical link. So I would really appreciate anything you would do to try to establish, put some teeth into your very strong and appropriate call. Just similarly, I want to ask you about the enforcement of an advertising code on downstream advertisers, which is even more complicated in its way. One of the ads we showed at our last hearing was not placed by Sega, as I recall, but was placed by a retailer. Sega responded to our concern by requiring advertisers who seek co-op advertising payments to make sure the ratings are clearly visible in the ads. I wonder if you anticipate that the other members of the committee would implement the advertising code with respect to downstream advertisers in a similar way. Mr. Heistand or Mr. Lincoln?
I'm not sure I understand your description of downstream advertisers.
Well, I'm really talking about retailers primarily who may get into cooperative advertising with the producers.
Well, the discussions that we've had to date with retailers have centered on two communications with consumers. Mm-hmm. One is materials that we would put up at store level to educate and inform parents about what the rating symbols mean. And second would be having the rating system symbols shown in their advertisements which feature our products. We can't speak for the retailers today. We're not prepared to say that in any ad that they run, the symbol will be a minimum of 1/2 square inch. But the feedback we've had from all key retailers is they want to work with us on this, and they plan to support the rating system and show the rating symbols.
Mr. Lincoln, do you have anything to add from the point of view of Nintendo about how you would attempt to influence what I've called the downstream advertising of your product?
I think that I would echo what Mr. Heistand said. It seems to me that we will have to address our co-op advertising policies, Nintendo's policies, once the rating system is in place. And it would be my view that we would want to insist in our co-op advertising policy that the rating symbol be displayed in a retailer's ad. In the absence of the rating system, it's really speculation, but certainly, as I sit here, that would be Nintendo's intention.
Thank you. Mr. Volkwine, you want to add anything to that, or have we covered it?
I think you've done a pretty good, comprehensive job. I would add that this is going to be a process. Our experience shows that it's going to take a while because you have to educate advertising agencies, customers, and even the person pasting up ads.
Sure.
To be part of a title is the rating, and that's as simple as that.
I think Senator Cole has a relevant question.
I just want to add on to what Senator Lieberman has said. And isn't it true, or is it true, that unless you are able substantially to get everybody aboard, at some point this falls apart? In other words, how long would Nintendo or Sega, understandably, be limited in terms of your business's potential if in fact some of your competitors are able, without any harm to manufacture and then sell in stores games that might have been censored, but they don't go through the process, and the stores are willing to sell them, and they gain that competitive advantage. Isn't this a major problem in reaching the goal? In other words, either everybody or virtually everybody has to play and abide by some common set of rules, or else, after a point, nobody does. Is that a real danger?
Oh, if the market is demanding products that are more controversial in terms of content, in terms of being more violent or being sexual, and the products that are going out and delivering that don't go through the rating system, there would be a huge disincentive among the cooperating members, the members that are part of the association, to be playing on a different playing field than the other competitors. And clearly, you know, that would be a threat, and that's something that in designing the system we need to ensure maximum participation.
Let me go now, Mr. Heistand, to the question of game content prescriptions. And again, as positive as we are, Senator Cole and I, about the response, quite a comprehensive and substantial response that you've presented today to our interest in a rating system. Obviously, if the rating system becomes an excuse for publishing the worst stuff, it's not going to have the effect we want it to have. You said in your testimony that the industry committee is not in a position to develop game content prescriptions, and I understand that that's beyond your charge, although I note that both of the companies before us have their own game content guidelines, and I do hope that at a next step of your development that it may be possible to develop some industry content guidelines. But just to be clear and on the record, I take it that it's your position, speaking on behalf of the committee rather than a representative of the Electronic Arts Company for which you work, that the decision to adopt content restrictions is for the moment the province of individual companies. Is that correct?
That is correct. We don't believe it's our business to dictate game content or restrict any creator, any publisher from producing something that any one of us may find objectionable. We can't do this as a group any more than the American Booksellers Association can tell Simon & Schuster what to publish, or the MPAA can tell Disney's Touchstone Film Division what movies they can publish.
But just to be clear, I take it that you see no inherent conflict between the industry, through your committee, developing a rating system, and individual companies imposing additional restrictions on the content that they wish to license or publish.
If our partners and colleagues at Sega and Nintendo had more stringent requirements for products that would be compatible with their machines, there would be no problem with that.
Okay. Now, the cable television industry has been going through a similar process, and in its initiative, which it calls Voices Against Violence, it's agreed to use an outside monitor to analyze violence in television programming and to issue a public annual report. Yesterday, NCTA, in fact, announced that it was going out for bids on that monitor. Would your trade association be willing to consider something similar for video games? Which it would be an annual independent review, a report really on the extent of violence and other potentially objectionable material in the games.
I think we would consider that. To date, there's no evidence that there is a linkage between video game play and content and aggressive behavior in children, at least none that we've been able to turn up. Dr. Jeffrey Goldstein, professor of Temple University, professor of psychology, recently reviewed all major studies done on this subject and concluded that while this makes for good headlines, the majority of psychological studies and books published deny that there's any linkage. If this is something that, as an industry, we see as a concern, if we see evidence of emulation, that children are behaving similar to what they're seeing on a interactive entertainment software product, we would monitor it.
I must say I'm surprised by the second part of your answer because it runs contrary to the testimony that we received at the last hearing from experts, and I gather that the preponderance of evidence of social science in this area, which is focused, these studies have been focused primarily on television, violence in television, says that aggressive behavior is stimulated by watching this, and I acknowledge that the research data on the effect of video games is limited because it's a relatively new phenomenon, although I presume it will increase. But both the experts before us last time, and I guess we ourselves, just in the exercise of common sense, assume that the effect is similar, perhaps even greater, because we're talking about an interactive process here where the kids are involved in creating the violence and in some sense are rewarded for it. So I don't need to get into that argument again with you. I wanted to register my disagreement with the second part of what you said, but go back to the first part of what you said, which is to appreciate that you will consider the possibility of an outside monitor and understand that what the cable people are doing is not saying that that person would have the ability to censor what goes on cable, but would be an independent outside authority to publish an annual report describing what's happened on cable television in these areas of concern of violence and sexual content. I know in our earlier hearing, some of the witnesses said that which I gather to be the truth, said that the games that we find objectionable are a very small fraction of the games and interactive products that are out there. That may be one of the conclusions that the monitor would reach. Do you want to respond?
No, I think we can leave it with that we will consider that.
I'd like to add, Senator, that this is a new association, that as it becomes, as the ink dries on our association partnership and we act as colleagues instead of the vicious competitors that have characterized our startup, that we will address some of these issues in the form of an annual report that would report our progress on a variety of issues, and that could very well be one of them.
Well, that would be a step forward as part of the other steps forward you're taking. I know that both you, Sega, and Nintendo have your own, as I said, game content codes or guidelines. And I would ask you at this point whether you anticipate that you will continue to have the game content standards once the industry-wide system is in place, or do you anticipate any narrowing or widening of your existing guidelines? Mr. Lincoln, do you want to start?
Well, I think, as I testified in December, we've had game content guidelines at Nintendo since 1985. And we have enforced them over that period of time. Certainly, it's our intention at Nintendo to continue to maintain those guidelines, particularly with respect to Nintendo. As far as...
Let me just interrupt. And it was on the basis of those guidelines that you decided not, for instance, to produce or market Night Trap.
That's correct. So I think we will continue the guidelines in the future.
Mr. Volkwine?
Guidelines are a good way for a company to understand who it is as a company, and I couldn't imagine that Sega wouldn't want guidelines in place internally, regardless of an industry-wide rating system that would describe what types of games we want on our platform, especially since we, in many respects, have some ability to impact that.
And do I remember correctly that both companies established advisory boards to assist you in the construction and implementation, again, of your own content guidelines? Beyond the rating system, we're talking about the initial decision about what you're going to produce and then how you would rate it and market it. Am I correct that you've been involved with outside people in constructing these?
I think we have, from time to time, consulted with outside experts. But in the main, the guidelines that we have developed over a period of time and that are set forth in the written statement that I filed with the committee in December really reflect our own internal view of what we feel is appropriate.
Okay. Let me go on to another area. Mr. Heistan, it was not clear from your testimony how the industry is proposing to handle product that is already on the market. So I ask you now whether the industry will be submitting all existing products or some existing products for rating, or in the case of Sega or 3DO, which has had its own rating system, for re-rating under the new system.
Regarding existing products, as we said in the beginning, our goal is to get a rating system in place as soon as possible. Our industry is one that can be characterized that when a new title is launched, 70% of the volume of that title, 70% of the sales occur in the first 3 months. So for us to have the most influence on the products that are being consumed, we are targeting to get this system in place as soon as possible. There are probably a few titles any one of us might find is not suitable for a very young child to play. In total, there are probably 4,000 or 5,000 titles in the marketplace today, and there are 50,000 retail outlets. For us to try and go back and rate those products, sticker all those products, would put such a burden on accomplishing what we're trying to do for the next 6 months, it's virtually impossible.
Well, let me alter it this way. I understand what you're saying, that there are thousands of titles out there. But I do think in terms of the credibility of the whole approach, and again, I appreciate the distance we've come here, that it would really help if, for instance, Mortal Kombat is still out there. It seems to me that it ought to be re-rated. Versions of Night Trap, I gather, are still available in the 3DO system. Lethal Enforcer is out there. There are a certain limited number of games that have attracted attention, and I wonder if, I'll ask you, Mr. Volkwine and Mr. Lincoln, whether you would consider submitting those that have become the obvious subject of public interest without asking you to submit every title you ever marketed or sold to this new rating system. Mr. Lincoln?
Well, I think, as I've previously testified, and as you've pointed out, Nintendo does not do Night Trap, and in the case of Mortal Kombat, we eliminated the fatality moves. We did introduce a toned-down version of Lethal Enforcers. I would think that the way to handle this would, I think it's important that we do everything we can to get the rating system in place as quickly as possible. So that's the primary goal. But I think that certainly that this issue that you've raised, if we're talking about a limited number of titles, is something that perhaps the committee could address. I think what Mr. Heistan was referring to was just all of the games, but...
Yeah, and I accept that. I understand that the effective impossibility of doing that. Mr. Volkwine, how about yourself? Would you agree to submit Mortal Kombat for rating under the new system?
Mortal Kombat is a title from a third party, so that we must work with them, and we would certainly pass on your remarks and use whatever influence we can on that. I think the remark Jack made is the central one, though. To the extent we look back rather than forward, we're going to lose time on putting this system in place in time to get the majority of sales. It's my understanding that sales in the United States for Mortal Kombat have already sold through upwards of 3 million titles. So I would submit that going backwards now to sticker what is left is not perhaps the best use of our time. We have promised earlier, and we will resubmit our Night Trap title for review and choose whether to remarket it or not. One of the things I think we will be discussing as an association is perhaps an older title that is going to be remarketed or relaunched should be the subject for consideration for going back through a rating system.
Yeah, I hope you will do that. I understand that that Mortal Kombat was, you produced as part of an arrangement with a third party. I believe they're part of your association. Am I not?
That's correct.
So I hope you will work with them if there are contractual arrangements or they're not, to see if that's become such a symbol of the public's concern, and it's a real concern, that I think one of the best ways to get this system going in a credible way, in addition to all that you've done, is to put that one into the new system. I assume, but I'll just ask you the question, it's your business, not mine, that Mortal Kombat will continue to sell in substantial numbers as this goes on. That although I know the business changes dramatically, that this is so hot a title that there will continue to be substantial sales. Maybe not another 3 million, but substantial sales.
Different than other media forms, we have very short life cycles in our industry. We can launch, Electronic Arts can launch a title like John Madden Football 1994. The minute the football season is over, that product stops selling. The minute that we announce plans for John Madden Football 95, it discontinues. The same thing I think is true here with Mortal Kombat. If I had to guess off the top of my head what % of the total volume that's going to be sold on Mortal Kombat 1 has already occurred, I would say it's well over 90%.
Okay, I hope you'll go back to that and see if you can help us get this started with that kind of strength. And it leads me to this final question. The committee has the 5 major hardware manufacturers. I wonder if each of them are going to require all of their licensees to submit products for rating. Do you know, Mr. Heiston?
We haven't posed that question to each company. The decision to date has been to define this thing and get them to support it.
Right.
I think our committee and our industry can't dictate to any individual company what they have to do. Both Sega and Nintendo have said that moving forward, they would recommend, they would make as part of their license agreements that people do display the licenses prominently. You know, whether they could guarantee to you today someone that they've had an existing agreement with that's in effect, they can't go back and say the agreement is null and void now, you have to do this. But these companies are powerful enough that if Howard Lincoln or Ed picked up the phone and said, we want you to rate the products, I think in most instances the people are going to do it.
Yeah, exactly. Mr. Lincoln, Mr. Volkwind, is it your intention to do that?
Yes, I think what Mr. Heistan said, other than his comment about my picking up the phone, is correct. Our intention would be to require licensees, as a part of the ongoing renegotiation of our license agreements, to provide a rating for the product. That's going to take a period of time because our contracts are, for example, 2 years in length. But we'll go a step further. Once the rating system is up and running, I think that we'll do everything we can on a non-contractual basis to encourage our licensees to rate their games.
I would say for Sega's part that with the system in place to date, we have 100% of compliance, and I would expect nothing more for the future system.
Great. Again, I don't have any more questions. I thank you for, we've come a considerable distance, really to your credit, since December when this started. We obviously all have a distance yet to go, as you acknowledge yourself, that we're now at the next stage, which is how to establish the ratings categories. But I think you've set up a process that's a good one. And Senator Cole and I will probably want to come back at whatever point you feel you've done enough more to come in and talk about it more completely. But I think you've really heard the message here, and I appreciate it. And I do think that it's going to make it easier for parents, and it's going to make this society, it's going to be one small step. And this is we're not going to have a less violent society or a more valued society with any one single magic step. It's going to take a lot of individual steps, and we're all responsible. But I think you've demonstrated responsibility and willingness to take that step on behalf of the video game industry, and I appreciate it very much. Senator Cole?
Yes, I feel similarly. I think what we can accomplish this year will set a standard that will be noticed throughout our country at many different levels. I cannot tell you the level of interest that I've received from people back in Wisconsin on what's happening, because it gets publicized because of the fact that I'm, along with Senator Lieberman, co-chairing this committee on this. People are really interested to see what we're going to accomplish. They're skeptical, but they're really interested, and they know it's important. And if we can do it collectively, I think we'll have done a very important thing that reaches in its impact in our country even beyond this industry, as important as it is. So I also am very pleased with the start that we've made.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We'll now call the second panel representing the retail stores, Mr. Chuck Kirby, who's the merchandise manager for Walmart Stores, Inc., Mr. John Sullivan, who's the vice president of Toys R Us, Inc., and Ms. Mary P. Evans, who's the vice president of store operations of Babbage's, Inc.
Joe, I got to go. I have another hearing I have to go. Good job.
You too. We'll make it perfect. Surprise. Have a good weekend. I welcome the three of you. You've already received some mention and attention, appreciation. We look forward to your continued cooperation, because you really are critical in making this work. I'm going to start with Mr. Kirby on behalf of Walmart. Thanks for being here, and we look forward to your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for having us here. Thank you, Senator Cole. My name is Chuck Kirby. I am the Divisional Merchandise Manager of Electronics for Walmart Stores. We're currently merchandising interactive software in approximately 2,000 locations. Walmart fully supports the establishment of an industry-wide rating system for interactive software. We believe a credible rating system is needed to help parents determine if a video is appropriate for their children. After discussing this issue with several key members of the video game industry, we believe the industry is committed to establishing a credible rating system, and we intend to hold them to that. Walmart will fully support a credible rating system and offer any assistance necessary in the implementation of the system. We will provide point-of-purchase materials defining the rating system to our customers, and will include each game's individual rating in any advertising that is done. Upon implementation of an industry-wide rating system, Walmart will only purchase video games that have gone through the rating process and received a rating. Thank you.
Mr. Kirby, by congressional standards, that was an unusually short statement, but I would add it was unusually significant, and I appreciate it very much. Am I correct that Walmart is the largest retailer of video games in America today?
Mr. Sullivan of Toys R Us might argue that point. we would be a significant player, I think.
Significant player. So obviously, if you say that you're only going to carry rated games, that's a tremendous incentive for any producer out there who wants to sell to rate their games.
Yes, sir.
And I appreciate that very much. Mr. Sullivan, are you the largest retailer of video games in America?
Senator, in this format, probably not.
Okay. Representing Toys R Us. Go on.
Thank you. My name is John Sullivan. I am currently Vice President for Toys R Us. I am also accompanied by Roger Gaddu. Roger is the Executive Vice President and General Merchandise Manager at Toys R Us. He's prepared to testify and answer questions also. I did not have a prepared statement, but I'm here to convey the following 3 points for my company. Number one, Toys R Us fully supports the establishment of an industry-wide rating system. We feel an industry-wide rating system is important for the consumer to clearly and easily understand the game content, enabling them to make an informed buying decision. Number two, Toys R Us would support the industry-wide rating system via in-store point-of-purchase materials and in our advertising. Point three, once the industry-wide rating system is established, Toys R Us would also only purchase rated games. Thank you.
We're on a roll. That's great. Thank you. Ms. Evans.
My name is Mary Evans, and I'm the Vice President of Store Operations for Babbage's.
Tell us about Babbage's, because some of the folks here, and maybe some watching on television, may not know about Babbage's. Great.
Senator. Thank you.
This is a free advertisement possibility we're offering.
Thank you. Babbage's owns and operates 302 retail stores in 39 states and in Puerto Rico. Our stores specialize in the sale of video games and computer software for the home. I was the manager of the company's first store, which opened in 1983, and therefore I've been associated with the video game industry for 11 years. But in addition to my association with the video game industry as a retail executive, I am affected by video games in another way as well. I am the very proud mother of 2 young boys. So I am strongly in favor of a video game rating system from 2 distinct standpoints, as a retailer and, of course, as a mother. And I really appreciate the opportunity to speak here today. At Babbage's, we see a rating system as something that will help us improve our customer service. With a good rating in place, our people in over 300 stores will be better able to assist parents and grandparents in making an informed decision as to whether or not the content of a particular video game is appropriate for their child. As a mother working in this industry, even I find it difficult to know which games are appropriate for my sons. Since I know that a rating system would be helpful to me, I feel certain that it would be of even greater value to a typical parent. Let me also say that when a rating system is established, I will see to it that Babbage's store personnel ensure that our customers understand the information the system is intended to provide. Not only does Babbage's favor the implementation of a rating system, we strongly recommend that once it is established, all video game publishers participate in the same system. I have discussed this issue with our Vice President of Merchandising, who has direct responsibility for determining what we do and do not carry in our stores. She, I might add, is also the mother of 2 young children. She has made it very clear that a video game released without a rating would raise a red flag in her mind, and it would be very unlikely that Babbage's would stock such a title. Although a significant part of our sales are from video games, another important segment of our business is entertainment software for computers. We believe that a rating system should also be established for this type of software. The growth of CD-ROM technology will inevitably lead to more and more software programs which incorporate digitized video of live actors. As a result, the need for a rating system for computer software will become greater and greater. In closing, let me reiterate that Babbage's strongly believes that a video game rating system should be established by our industry, and we welcome the opportunity to assist in any way we can in the development and the implementation of such a system. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Evans. I'm going to urge you, based on the testimony of Walmart's and Toys R Us, to see if you can't convince that
I think I
Vice
can.
President of yours to go from very likely not stock to will not stock and sell the non-rated games.
There may be a circumstance where there's Mickey Mouse all over a box, or Donald Duck, which that would be, but I can almost assure you that that won't happen in our stores.
Okay, I appreciate it. I appreciate that from all 3 of you, because that really puts market teeth into the rating system, which will make it work. Let me just clarify, because it's an important point, and it was certainly my understanding, Mr. Heisteen has left the stand, but witness table, but that the effort of the committee really is directed toward covering not only the video games that exist now, but the full range of interactive games, including software, computer games. I note for the record that Mr. Heisteen is nodding, and so that the question you raised is a goal of the committee, and very importantly so, because well, as one of the witnesses said in their testimony, this industry changes not within a period of years, but within a period of months, and obviously the reach of the personal computer will become more dramatic here. I know that Senator Cole has to depart soon, and I wonder if he has any questions that he would like to ask before he does.
Thank you. Yes, I too want to say how marvelous it is that you are prepared to take the pledge that you have taken this morning, and what a great impetus and a start it is for us to get the ball rolling. Is it probably true that if, in fact, it doesn't spread and a point in time comes when you do not represent the overwhelming majority, along with some of your competitors in the industry, with respect to taking this pledge, then you would be at a competitive disadvantage at some point. Again, I'm referring back to how important it is several months from now that the start we've made really start a snowball rolling down a hill and getting bigger and bigger as it rolls down the hill. Would you not, in fact, just as prudent business people, be required to review the sincere, well-intended pledge that you're making today if a year from today you're the only two? Mr. Sullivan.
Well, it's certainly a valid point. I can't envision us moving off this, our position. We have, as a company, have come to the agreement that this is an important and very important part of our business, and that the rating system, an industry-wide rating system, would be an important thing for us to support. I couldn't answer you as to the future if others moved off it, if we would, but others haven't moved on to it, and we have. So I can't speak to the future as to how would we respond, but we feel it's very important and that we do support it now.
Wonderful. Mr. Kirby.
The possibility does exist. I think the support is there. Really, we're representing the customer today, and it's the customer response. I think you said earlier, we're the first ones to hear, really being on the front line from our customers. The customers have been very vocal that they do want a rating system, and I believe that the retailers that support their customers will support this rating system, and I don't think that issue will come up.
That's great. Ms. Evans.
Well, speaking as a parent, it will be very important that once the rating system is established, that it stays established and continues to grow with the number of titles coming out. So I truly do not believe that Babbage's would ever get off of the rating system for any reason, and we would definitely continue to carry the games that have been rated.
All right. Just another question. As people try and assess what happened here today, particularly with respect to the three of you at Walmart and Toys R Us, what do you imagine the impact is of the pledge that you're taking today, the impact on this whole process will be, understanding your business, the retail business, your position in the retail business in this country? Do you imagine this as a considerable impact in getting this thing off the ground and moving in the right direction, Mr. Kirby?
I do. I think that any manufacturers that were out there that might have been on the fence of whether to rate their product or not, that this will assist them.
Mr. Sullivan?
I agree. I think that definitely the support of the three of us does have meaning, and that anyone that was on the fence would definitely want a rated game.
Ms. Evans?
Yes, I have to agree with both of them.
Well, I think that's marvelous. I congratulate you, and I think you've done a great service for our country and for the parents in our country, and as a result for your business too. And so I'm really pleased with your decision.
Great timing. Thank you, Senator Cole. I again applaud your leadership. Senator Cole is asking a very good question, and it's from his own background as well in business. But you as leaders in the market are genuinely leading. I mean, you're creating a market reality there. Now, somebody can always try to get around that and offer unrated products, but you're making it hard for them to do that, and I appreciate that very much, and I appreciate what you said, Mr. Kirby, that really you're representing the consumers here, your customers, because I think this is, and you all said it, this is really what they want. So in that sense, I hope and believe that you're not only showing a kind of good citizenship, but that it ultimately is going to be good business sense too, because this is what your customers want. Let me ask you just a few more questions. Mr. Kirby, you stated that Walmart will provide point-of-purchase materials concerning the rating system. I wonder if you've thought at all about what kinds of materials, as this system is developed, that you'd like to see in your stores. Is it posters? Is it brochures? Is it warnings on the shelves? What do you look for here?
I think the big thing is this first comes to fruition, the consumer's not going to know anything about it.
Right.
We do have an advantage in the fact that all of our video game product is in one location in the store. I would see a poster, a major signing package, the big thing defining what the rating system is to the customer so they can make the decision. Also, on top of that, anytime we would merchandise the product out of its normal side counter home, we would also have point-of-purchase material there to support the product so that there wouldn't be a miss. Specifically, we haven't designed what it would be, but we would support it in a very significant manner.
Good. Ms.
Evans? Yes, not only would we support any kind of package that we could display in our store. I think it's really important for us to remember that on the package itself, it probably shouldn't be a removable sticker of any sort that the child could peel off and then as a parent would not know what the rating of the game would be, and probably somehow displayed on the cartridge where it's not removable.
Yeah, that's a very good point. We didn't bring that up today. We brought it up before, but I've had consumers, parents particularly, tell me this, that the kids will often throw away the cover, so they hope that the rating is on the cartridge as well. I think that's a good point. Mr. Sullivan?
Well, I think absolutely that we have to make it clear at the point of purchase that the rating system, not only how a game is rated, but what the rating system means. And we would do that, I would see, via various in-store signs, as well as clearly indicating on the actual product what the rating is.
Let me go to the next step in it, which is how you carry out the rating system and what kinds of steps might occur within the stores. And I understand in asking this that this is all very preliminary. For instance, Mr. Sullivan, Toys R Us led the way here in taking Night Trap off the shelves, and we appreciated that. Would you anticipate that Toys R Us might not carry products that were rated above, for instance, an adults only, or would you review each one to see, or would you segregate them in the store, since most of your customers are parents buying for kids, I presume? That's when I go into your stores.
Well, it's difficult to guess as to what the rating system that would develop as, but I would envision that if it had a system similar to the Sega system that there are, that the Sega rating system that's in place, that there are games that we would determine to be not appropriate for our store.
Right. A little different in your case, although because you both have broader audience, a broader product line, but I wonder whether you would consider segregating some of the higher, or in my understanding, lower rated material in separate sections of the store and separate shelves. Ms. Evans or Mr. Kirby?
Yes, we would take that under consideration. We also, as a company, do not carry some software titles that we feel are not appropriate for our store based on the packaging and the content of that particular product.
Good. Mr. Kirby?
I would tell you definitely there could be a product category rating if it's adult, as in an X rating for video or anything carrying strong sexual content. It will not be in our stores. Again, without knowing exactly what the system is, I don't know what category that's going to be. The other categories and the other ratings will be clearly called out and will be grouped together within category of product, whether it be action, adventure, sports, whatever.
Mr. Sam would be proud of you.
Thank you.
That's a good answer. Final question in this line, a difficult question, but I wonder if you've thought at all about whether it would be necessary to try to train or at least inform in some way beyond routine your sales personnel about how to live within the rating system. Mr. Sullivan?
I'm not sure I understand the question, Senator.
Well, in other words, whether you try to advise your sales personnel about the rating system and train them how to help you implement it and advise consumers about it.
Well, I think that we have had, with the assistance of Nintendo and Sega, we have dedicated personnel during times in our year that that are there to answer questions for consumers, and I would imagine that that person's responsibility would certainly encompass the rating system and an explanation as to what the games are appropriate. But beyond that, I think that we also have a role of monitoring the games that are purchased, and to that degree, I would think that there definitely are games that we would pass on that would not be appropriate for our store.
Ms. Evans?
Educating our salespeople on the actual rating system. For us, we're not as big as Walmart and Toys R Us in store size, and since we only have video games and computer software, well, as long as I'm head of operations, that will take place, and we will be able to provide them with the proper information to give the customers the best information.
Good. Mr. Kirby?
At the implementation of the rating system, we would definitely spend time training and educating our associates on how to carry out the rating system so they can answer questions from the consumer.
Let me ask you a final question. I thank you for that. Whether, I know at least one of you has been in touch with Mr. Heistand's committee. Is there an adequate interaction between the groups at work here so that you feel that they're designing a system that's sensitive to your concerns as retailers?
Yeah, I'll respond to that. I have been in contact with Mr. Highstand. I think there is the adequate communication. The chain of communication is open, and we've offered any support that could be beneficial. And I would like to applaud the group, because if you take the companies that they have without an association and come as far as they've come in this short period of time, they've really taken off the gloves. They are working together. This is a mutual problem, and they are addressing it, and I applaud them for that.
Well said. Either of the two of you want to comment on it?
Mr. Eiston has done an excellent job in keeping us within the loop. We've been involved in a meeting at CES, and he has done, since that point, has done an excellent job keeping us informed as to the group's progress and where they're headed.
Sevens?
I have not personally been involved with Mr. Heinstein, but I know members of our company have and are very, very for this.
Great. Okay. Thank you very, very much. This is building here. We've got a good rating system that seems to be taking shape. We've got you as really major forces in the retail sector agreeing to help us in a significant way implement it. I appreciate it very, very much. And I just go back to what I said about Bob Keeshan's African proverb, that really you're all showing that we're part of this village together, and it is the village that we need to cooperate to raise our kids as we want to raise them. So thank you very, very much. I look forward to shopping in all of your stores.
Thank you, Senator.
Take care. And now the third and last panel, Mr. R.A. Green. This is the Arcades. R.A. Green, the third president of the Amusement and Music Operators Association, and Steve Konigsberg, who's the president of the American Amusement Machine Association. Gentlemen, thank you for being here. Understand that this is a somewhat different but somewhat similar area of activity and concern, and we look forward to your testimony. Mr. Green, if you would go first.
Thank you, Chairman Lieberman, for the opportunity to testify today. My name is R.A. Green. My home and business are located in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. My three sisters and I currently own and operate an amusement company that my grandfather and father founded in 1957. Today I am representing the Amusement and Music Operators Association, AMOA. Our association is a 1,700-member association made up of owners of coin-operated amusement devices, including video games. The great majority of our membership consists of privately owned businesses that employ less than 5 people. It is important to note that our membership deals primarily in commercially placed amusement devices and does not, as a rule, manufacture or sell or rent video games to the home. We are in the entertainment business with a wide variety of music and amusement products. Our prominent forms of entertainment are jukeboxes, pool tables, electronic darts, pinballs, and other games of skill that appeal to a wide variety of people, from the very young to the young at heart. Video games represent only a relatively small portion of our total business. Therefore, any guidelines would have a minimal impact on the majority of our industry. I am a father of 3, and as a parent, I am concerned about America's children and their future. As an association, we share your concerns about the rise in violence in America today. Acknowledging the trend towards increased violence in some video games prompted the AMOA board to take a proactive position last October. This resulted in a public statement and position paper presented to our membership during our annual business meeting. This statement requested that manufacturers of video games address the issue in our industry of graphic content found in a small number of video games. We as an association encourage the current trend towards family entertainment centers. Family entertainment centers enforce the laws that are designed to protect children. Family entertainment centers are safe environments where families can go to spend quality time together while enjoying a variety of amusement and learning activities, meeting a variety of interest and skill levels. Following the congressional hearing in December, we began to contact other interested groups such as the Consumer Home Retail Association manufacturers, distributors, child psychologists, and parent groups in a continuing effort to resolve this issue. AMOA, along with this broad coalition, is committed to developing a rating system which will ensure that consumers have information they need to make appropriate decisions. The main purpose of this coalition is to establish a system that will give parents information about game content. Our objective is to design a system that will be easy for everyone to accept, for the industry to use, and for consumers to understand. The coalition's proposed system will work because it will provide parents with the information they need to make informed decisions for their children. We endorse the following concepts, which were developed by this board. Establish a system and implement it as soon as possible. The members of this coalition are working together to meet the Consumer Home Market's 1994 Christmas selling season. Establish an independent, highly credible rating board which will have clear authority to evaluate and rate video game software. Establish clear categories, easily recognized and understandable, including content description and recommendations for appropriate audiences. Undertake an in-depth consumer education program to ensure that consumers have the information they need to make appropriate purchasing choices. Contact the individuals and groups whose help we will need to make this work. Experts on children's issues, retailers for the home market, manufacturers, developers, publishers, and other hardware and software companies. We suggest that the rating be displayed in the attract mode of a coin-operated video game. The attract mode is a digital message that is flashed repeatedly without the need for a coin to be inserted, displaying information about content of games to parents and consumers. This system will meet the objectives laid out by the senators. It will inform parents of contents and age appropriateness. It will be uniform across all platforms, making it easy to understand to the general public. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Green. I'll have some questions for you in a minute. Mr. Konigsberg,
Thank you,
welcome.
Senator. Thank you. The American Amusement Machine Association, AAMA, is pleased to testify on the efforts that the coin-operated video industry has undertaken to provide parents and consumers with information regarding the level of violence in some of our industry's products. AAMA is a national trade association that represents approximately 125 manufacturers, distributors, and parts suppliers of coin-operated amusement equipment. I am Steve Konigsberg, a distributor of coin-operated equipment in Baltimore, Maryland, and I also serve in the elected office of AAMA President. With me here today is Bob Fay, the Executive Director of our association. We are pleased to share with you our progress in addressing the concerns of these subcommittees about video game violence. AAMA recognizes that businesses who relate to young minds have a special responsibility for the content of their products. And that's why in June of last year, we asked one of our standing committees to tackle this violence issue and report back to the board, which they did in September. We then engaged each of the video game manufacturer members in a dialogue towards defining a proper role and actions for our association. This activity was underway but not concluded when you first introduced your initiative on this subject. However, with the involvement of Congress and their concerns and timetables, it became necessary for us to take this issue out of a standing committee with broad responsibilities and to place it in the hands of a committee specifically formed and dedicated to dealing with the video violence issue. Thus, our Parental Advisory Committee was formed in January 1994. The committee is made up of 5 manufacturers and 3 distributors. To date, that committee has designed a parental advisory system that embraces many of the principles that Congress is urging. For example, the public disclosure of violence and/or sex content and the inclusion of non-industry persons in an oversight role. Our Parent Advisory Committee will continue to refine this system for coin-operated video games. At the same time, we will actively work with the consumer and home video game industry towards a common goal of providing consumers and parents with a single, understandable, and reliable source of information. In fact, we have already attended all of the publicly held consumer and home video-related meetings. AAMA appreciates this opportunity to inform members of these Senate subcommittees that our industry is making serious efforts to find the appropriate steps needed to protect the interest of the children who use our products. Thank you, Senator.
Thanks, Mr. Konigsberg. Let me just pick you up on one of your last points, which is the work that your association is doing to develop a parental advisory system. Just to clarify something you said after that, would you be willing to simply submit your games for rating by, for want of a better name for now, I'll call it Mr. Highstand's organization, obviously provided that the cost was not exorbitant and the time delays were not significant, because of just the point that I think you made in passing, which is that from the public's point of view, it'll be a lot more clear and easily comprehensible if there's one rating system that runs through the entire video game industry. Also, from your point of view, it may reduce the need to set up a separate operation to do this.
Yes, Senator, the activities that we've taken to date are the result of our being a smaller industry. And as a result, we were able to take steps that you take to build consensus, to get agreement, to get focused on the issues rather rapidly. We do not view our activities as detracting from, but rather that it provides us an internal processing forum where we can become better informed, better educated, and participate in a more informed way to the larger goal in working with with Mr. Highstand's group. We recognize that we have some unique needs. There's some differences between us and consumer, and this committee gives us the ability to articulate them and to get them to the larger group. To answer your question specifically, we've no objection to a larger system that embraces those needs. But we find that this committee also is working very nicely, is our own way of processing toward that end.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about what the committee is doing insofar as it's reached a point where you can describe, for instance, what kinds of advisories you're contemplating? Would they have age distinctions? Would there be content descriptions? What kind of work are you doing now?
Okay. To date, we've been able to build a consensus around the content description. The subject of age is on the table, and it is one that is under active discussion. We've looked at the use of outside experts in the form of what we called a video monitoring council. And it was an outreach to the various interests and expertise that have been mentioned by other panels today to bring them into the rating or disclosure process, to give it credibility and to help us in the industry understand the needs and concerns of our ultimate customers, which are the consumers.
So you are contemplating some kind of content guidelines or description for your manufacturers?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, which presumably would put some things beyond the range of permissible. In other words, they would establish some parameters for the kinds of games that would be manufactured for the arcades.
What it would establish is the message that we're sending the public.
Right.
And that message is that this game contains violence, or this game contains sexually or graphic sex. The discussion that was held earlier in terms of age appropriateness is on the table with us, but I can report that the consensus so far of a voluntary is unanimous on at least the content base. So we really feel that we've moved along rather quickly and very positively to recognize the two principal issues, which is disclosure and outside oversight.
Okay, and you're in an area of activity which is not as private as, for instance, the person who buys something and takes it home. It's somewhat more like a movie, I suppose. Anybody has access to it, so that now obviously there are differences in terms of your ability to directly control and the ease of controlling, because of most of your operations are small businesses, I know. But let me ask you, Mr. Green, from your testimony, it sounded as if your members would prefer to have a clear rating system similar to what the motion picture folks have or to what Mr. Heistand is describing for the industry generally. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And I take it, and I believe the representative of your association at our hearing in December suggested that that there were already cases where either consumers or neighbors were raising questions about the neighbors to the arcades were raising questions about the content of the games.
Senator, across the country, since you started holding these hearings, we have seen corporations such as the national pizza chains, the national retail stores, people that have a higher level of corporate responsibility and an image to protect,
right,
demand that the more violent games be removed from their stores and places of business.
Yeah.
The economic side of that works for us. We, as an industry, embrace ratings because it allows us, A, to place games where they're appropriate to be placed.
Right.
It lets our customers know exactly what he's purveying to his public.
Right.
If it's children's arcades and children's games, if it's an adult game, whatever it may be, maybe it's more appropriate in an adult environment.
Well, that's a very important point and particularly relevant for your business. And we obviously hope for some self-regulation on content by the manufacturers, but you make an important point. Once we have a rating system, then your folks have the basis for making a decision. If something is rated adults only, then there's a real question as to whether it obviously, in my opinion, shouldn't be in a pizza parlor. In my opinion, shouldn't be in an arcade, but that's open to anybody. But probably feel differently about being in a bar, for instance, where you've got to be a certain age to get in there in the first place. So I think that willingness that you've expressed, and again, the market speaks, the consumers are speaking, and people in business have concerns about image as it affects their business. You mentioned, Mr. Green, the possibility of putting a rating in that flashing attract screen, which is displayed between playings, and I think that's a good idea. I wonder if there's more that can be done. Is there any sense to putting rating decals on the machine cabinets, for instance?
You would have to ask that of Mr. Koenigsberg.
Mr.
He's
Koenigsberg,
the manufacturing end of our business.
Right.
That's under active discussion. One of the things we have found is that any time we put decals on machines, we find little fingers that pick at them. And we also, our equipment tends to be moved from location to location over time, and the handling itself tends to wear down on decals. But we're looking at that to see if we can come up with something that might work in addition to the track mode that Ari spoke of.
I do think also we anticipated this question earlier, Mr. Green, on what we said about the placement based on ratings, but I hope that your association will consider adopting a code that would, I understand the difficulty in having, if you bring a wide range of games into an arcade with a limited number of employees, policing that. But it does seem to me that it may be possible to separate by area so that at least even if you had a limited number of employees in a place that they would know that if they saw a 13-year-old over in an area where there were only MA-17 games or adult-only games, that it would be within the range of your personnel to say, hey, young fella, you don't belong there. Does that make sense to you?
By nature, our industry's been changing.
Yeah.
If I could share with you a few minutes ago.
Sure.
In 1982, when the video boom, so to speak, was on, before everybody got a platform system at home, approximately 80% of all coin-op that was manufactured in this country was video. Today, that number is less than 25%. It is being directly reflected in the marketplace as far as numbers and types of games and family entertainment centers. Quite frankly, as video has moved into the home, it has moved out of our marketplace. I heard some numbers here today of 2,500, 5,000 titles available, because video for the home is easy to manufacture.
Sure.
It's copying a floppy disk or making a cartridge. The products that Steve has to manufacture, his association has to manufacture, are dedicated core systems that consist of a cabinet, a monitor, power supply, coin mechanism, and then the board. We might see 100 new titles in a year. More likely it's 80. The games that this committee has focused on make up a very small portion of that. So by virtue of more and more video moving into the home, our market tends to become something else. We concentrate now on games of skill. And video is constantly dwindle, and I dare say it will dwindle some more.
How would you define a game of skill as opposed to a video game?
Football game, basketball game. In the centers that I'm seeing in my travels around the country, redemption games or games for skill for prizes, making up over 60% of the product that's now found in stores. You simply do not have a video game room anymore. I mean, it's not on the cutting edge of our industry. Nobody does those anymore. They're dinosaurs.
Interesting. Okay, I have no further questions. I thank you for what you've begun to do, and I urge you to try to the extent that you're able to work with Mr. Highstand's committee, because it will create a national standard here. Our committee will want to continue to work with you and monitor your own association's development of guidelines as the ratings go into effect, because again, just as is true with the retailers of video games, and in a different sense has been true with the theater owners when it comes to the motion picture code, your role is going to continue to be an important one, perhaps diminishing in this limited sense, but nonetheless important, as kids obviously still enjoy going into the arcades, and I thank you for being here. Again, to wrap up very briefly, we're making real progress here. I thank everybody involved for doing that. The committees feel an obligation to stay involved and in a supportive way keep your feet to the fire so that this continues to make the progress that we have been making, which is really to the benefit of our kids and hopefully to society generally. We're going to keep the record of this hearing open for an additional 2 weeks. If anyone has additional testimony to submit, there may be a few members of the committee who couldn't be here today. We'll have some questions for the witnesses, which we will send to you for answer as quickly as possible. Again, I thank everybody, and this will formally adjourn the hearing.
Senators Lieberman, Cole, and others are holding a series of hearings on video game violence. The co-chairs of the hearing have introduced a bill that would create a commission to rate video games if the industry does not develop a workable system within a year.